Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. I'm Aaron Whitfield, 38, founder and CEO of a software company in Austin. The product started as a half-baked idea in a one-bedroom rental off South Lamar and turned into a platform used by companies I used to read about in business magazines. Revenue cleared $10 million last year. Numbers like that used to feel unreal. You blink, and suddenly the house is bigger, the vacations are quieter, and the people around you speak a little softer when you walk into a room. I told myself I'd earned that stillness. I believed it for a long time. For years, she believed it too. She loved telling friends how we bootstrapped the early days, loved hosting dinners on the back patio with the string lights and the catered everything, loved the ease that arrives when invoices are paid on time and the flight gets upgraded without you asking. Pride turned into habit. Habit turned into expectation. That's normal, I guess. You work so hard to make life smooth that you forget life isn't supposed to be smooth all the time. The first shift was small enough to miss. A question over salmon about how the cap table worked. Another over coffee about what fully diluted really meant. She wanted to know whether the company was ours or yours, and there was a tone under the question that wasn't curiosity. I brushed it off. People get interested when headlines get bigger. It comes with the territory. But curiosity became a pattern. At dinner, she wanted percentages. In the car, she wanted numbers. In bed, she asked what would happen if something happened to me. Ownership structure. Personal accounts. Vesting schedules for key hires. What the lake cabin was titled under. How many properties, how many accounts, how many ways the money moved. The other changes didn't ask for attention. They took it. Nights out that stretched later. Phone face down. New clothes arriving in slim boxes she opened when I wasn't around. A sharper perfume that announced the door opening before I saw her in the hallway. The laugh she used to keep for me started living in the glow of a screen. We would sit together and not share the same room. I stopped recognizing our house at 9 p.m. I'm not the guy who rifles through a phone or hires a private investigator. I've made a career out of reading signals without making a scene. You look for drift, not splashes. The drift was everywhere. She was present but unavailable, polite but distant, eager to talk about the future as long as the future was abstract and expensive. When I asked about a weekend together, the answers got vague. When I suggested that we skip a party and stay in, the look I got back wasn't anger. You can lie to yourself with enough productivity. Early runs, long meetings, late emails. There's always another problem to solve if you don't want to solve the one at home. I tried that for a while. Then I stopped. I ate meals at our table without trying to fill the silence. I let the house sound like itself. If a person wants to be caught, they get louder. If a person wants to be gone, they get quiet. She got very quiet. The money talk never slowed. She wanted to know how bonuses were calculated for the executive team, whether distributions counted as income for support calculations, what the accountant meant by tax efficient. She sprinkled the questions like seasoning so it wouldn't look like a plan. I answered what was public and let the rest roll past me. If you're calm long enough, people assume they're steering. It's a useful mistake. The moment the mask slipped wasn't cinematic. No accusation. Just a legal envelope on the entryway table with my name typed in a font you only see on documents you're going to remember. Divorce petition. A list of demands arranged like a bill of materials, property, accounts, support, fees. I read it twice standing up. 10 years of marriage summarized in bullets and signatures. I put the stapled stack back in the envelope and set it on my desk like it was a paperweight. Her posture changed overnight. She moved through rooms with a floating confidence, made calls on speaker in the kitchen, laughed a lot. Friends started appearing with congratulations disguised as concern. Brunches multiplied. A new set of names floated around our calendar: attorneys, mediators, consultants. She used the word closure like it was a coupon she was excited to redeem. I kept my routines. Mornings stayed early. Work stayed precise. I didn't argue. I've learned that when someone is running on certainty, resistance feeds them. The fastest way to deflate a performance is to give it no audience. So I watched. I let her gather the story she wanted to tell about us. I didn't correct the parts that were wrong. Truth doesn't need a megaphone. As the hearing date approached, the comments shifted from playful to pointed. Little digs meant to land and stick. Hope you don't mind learning to live smaller. Don't worry, you'll be fine. You always figure things out. I answered with a nod or a yes or nothing at all. She took my quiet for surrender. People who mistake stillness for weakness always do it loudly. The night before court, I ironed a shirt and polished shoes I hadn't worn since the last investor summit. The house was quiet. I sat at the kitchen island and went through my calendar like it was any other week. There's a calm that arrives when the outcome is outside your control and inside your preparation. I slept. Morning in Travis County is bright even when it's early. I parked in the garage under the courthouse and took the stairs 2 at a time because elevators collect conversations I didn't want to hear. She was already in the hallway when I reached our floor, standing with her lawyer, laughing at something on his phone. She saw me and smiled the way people smile at a stranger they once knew. I nodded. She turned back to her screen, still laughing. Inside the courtroom, the air felt colder than the hall. The judge's bench was high enough to make everyone look smaller. Papers whispered, shoes clicked, phones vibrated and got silenced again. I sat at the table with my attorney, hands folded, eyes forward. Across from me, she leaned back in her chair and crossed her legs like she had already made a withdrawal. She tilted a pad toward her lawyer and wrote something that made them both grin. I don't remember the first words the clerk said. I remember the sound of them, the cadence of formal language prepared for people who want to argue and people who want to listen. I chose listening. My breathing slowed. The judge shuffled a stack of documents like a dealer considering which card would end the hand. I glanced once at the window, where the sky was clean and ordinary, and settled in. She thought the room existed to confirm what she already believed. That momentum is the same thing as truth. That confidence is the same thing as leverage. That preparation always lives on the other side of the aisle. She was certain enough to laugh. I was quiet enough to hear everything. The day of the trial had arrived, and with it, her certainty. Mine was different. Whatever came next would come without noise from me. That's how you steer in a storm. Small movements, steady hands. Eyes on the horizon, no one else is watching. I didn't respond to the petition with grand speeches or late-night texts. I responded with a calendar. Everything routed through counsel, every word measured. Her side took my precision as fear. That was fine. People who want a reaction hate a man who treats chaos like paperwork. In the weeks before court, the theater picked up. She started speaking about the divorce like a promotion she'd earned. Friends I barely knew appeared in our kitchen with sympathetic nods and bright eyes, the kind of sympathy that smells like celebration. At brunch, she let phrases slip, set for life. Finally breathe. Time to live how I deserve. She talked about real estate in neighborhoods I didn't like and cars I would never drive, and she did it in future tense, as if the ink was already dry. The digs were small, but sharp. You can keep your office furniture, she said once, sliding past me in the hallway like she was granting a kindness. Another time at dinner. Downsizing builds character. You'll adjust. She didn't raise her voice. The point was to measure. She watched my face the way gamblers watch dice, hungry for the twitch that tells them the table is theirs. I gave her nothing to read. Her lawyer matched the performance. Demands came in dressed as negotiations. Temporary spousal support that looked permanent, a monthly number that assumed my company existed to bankroll an exit, fees that tried to turn my success into her salary. When my attorney pushed back, they answered with volume. It was always fair share and marital lifestyle, never math. I've built a life on math. I know what adds up, and I know what's theater. We had one status conference where she showed up late, sunglasses on indoors, laughing with her attorney like they'd just crushed a round of golf. She didn't look at me when she took her seat. There's a particular brand of confidence that arrives when a person thinks the river is flowing only one direction. I watched it walk the length of the courtroom and sit down across from me with its legs crossed. Pressure is funny. It doesn't always come from big scenes. Sometimes it's 100 small turns of the wrench. Discovery requests time to collide with board meetings. Deposition blocks that started at 8 in the morning and ended in the hour I used to lift. Emails that hit at 6:59 p.m. asking for answers by 7:30. My attorney asked if I wanted to push back harder. I told him no. Let them think the tempo is theirs. I'll keep mine. I did speak once, in the kitchen, when the house was too quiet to pretend otherwise. What's going on? I asked, not an accusation, just a line in the air to see if she'd step over it. She shrugged, delicate, like shouldering a scarf. People change, Aaron. I waited. Is there someone else? She laughed at that and left the room with her phone in her hand and her perfume still hovering where she'd been. The answer didn't matter. The game was already on the calendar. Her mother called me twice to say she hoped we could keep things civilized. The first time I agreed. The second time she hinted about what's fair after 10 years. I told her the court would decide fairness and left it there. A mutual friend texted that my wife had been pricing a house near the lake for when this is over. I set my phone face down and finished the spreadsheet on my screen. I've learned that futures people can't afford are the loudest ones they talk about. The night before depositions, she posted a photo with 3 friends I'd met exactly once. The caption was a toast to fresh starts. I scrolled past it and set my alarm. During the deposition, her lawyer tried to corner me with questions dressed as moral judgments. Why did you travel so much? Why so many late nights? As if building a company were a crime of neglect. I answered every question directly, nothing extra. A clean record is its own defense. What bothered them most, I think, was that I didn't take the bait. No pleading in the hallway. Just a man in a suit who arrived on time, spoke when spoken to, and signed what needed signing. There's a power in refusing the script you're handed. Their strategy needed my outrage to work. I declined the role. The morning of the hearing, she was radiant in the way people are when they believe the moment belongs to them. She had the look of someone making mental inventory of a life she hadn't yet earned. She and her attorney stood in the corridor, laughing softly over a phone screen. I caught a phrase, lifestyle maintenance, and filed it next to all the other phrases that turn money into morality. I walked past without breaking stride. Inside, I sat with my attorney and watched the room arrange itself. The clerk shuffled papers. A bailiff with forearms like carved wood told a whispering couple to sit. Her lawyer spread exhibits across their table the way a magician fans cards before he asks you to pick one. She leaned toward him and said something that made them both grin. When the judge came in, the air tightened a half degree, the way it does when a storm moves up the river. We stood, sat, and the case was called. Her attorney started with a speech about contributions and sacrifices and a lifestyle cultivated together. He pronounced the company's revenue like it was a confession. He said, equitable, so many times the word lost its edges. My attorney rose and declined to make an opening statement. The judge nodded, unreadable. We moved into the record. Her lawyer guided the court through photographs of vacations and dinner parties, as if linen napkins were legal precedent. He asked the judge to take judicial notice of public filings he barely understood. Each time he raised his voice, it fell flat against the bench like a hand that missed a doorknob. I watched the judge watch the performance. There's a certain patience on a judge's face when he's waiting for the part that matters. It looks like boredom if you don't know the difference. I know the difference. He let the story run until it ran out of itself. Then he lifted the stack of documents in front of him and squared the corners with 2 taps against the wood. Across the aisle, she angled her chair so she could see me and her attorney at the same time, like a spectator who wants both the play and the reaction shot. She smiled, small, private, confident. I kept my hands folded and my eyes steady on the bench. People mistook my quiet for surrender from the beginning. Let them keep mistaking it. The clerk handed the judge a packet. He scanned the first page, then the next, lips moving just enough to show he was reading, not skimming. The room had that courtroom sound I've come to recognize. Paper's dry whisper, a pen's nervous tap, a throat cleared into a sleeve. Outside the high windows the morning was ordinary and bright, but inside everything funneled toward a single point. The judge set one stack aside and lifted another, thicker one, the kind of packet that doesn't exist unless someone has done the work to make it exist. He looked up, met the room, and began. I didn't ask for a sidebar. I let the room settle around me and watched the machine do what machines do, move forward. Her lawyer had the energy of a man who thinks volume is evidence. He opened with a speech about partnership and sacrifice, about a lifestyle built together, about how continuity demanded generosity from me and magnanimity from the court. He recited revenue like a sin and vacations like a ledger of guilt. Every sentence was shaped to make success sound like a crime with no victim but her. She sat angled toward him, chin lifted, smile controlled. That smile had become her uniform. It said this moment belonged to her. It said she had already cashed the check in her head. When he hit the phrase, lifestyle maintenance, the corner of her mouth tilted, and she wrote something on the yellow pad between them. He glanced down, nodded, and kept going like a radio you can't turn off. My attorney asked if I wanted him to respond point by point. I shook my head. He understood. There's a time to object and a time to let a man finish his performance, so the silence after will belong to the right person. I sat with my hands folded and let the cadence of courtroom language wash past. Dates, exhibits, declarations, the careful way counsel says respectfully when he means the opposite. Her lawyer tried to turn me into a character. The absent builder, the tireless executive, the man who comes home late to a wife who keeps the calendar and the home and the soul of the relationship. He looked toward the bench on all the right beats, a stage actor finding his light. He touched the stack of photos they'd printed, dinners, flights, hotel lobbies that all look the same when you're not in them, and set them aside like a weapon he didn't need to use yet. I could feel her eyes on me between his sentences. It was a pulse rather than a stare. Check if he flinches. Check if he blinks. Check if there's a tell. I gave her the same view I'd given investors when a demo crashed mid-meeting and everyone waited to see if the founder would panic. Calm is not the absence of feeling. The judge listened the way judges do when they have already decided what matters and are patiently waiting for counsel to find it. He made a few notes in the margins with a fine black pen. He allowed the story to unspool, and I could tell from the way his eyes returned to the same page that the story would not be the deciding factor. When it was our turn, my attorney stood, buttoned his jacket, and took exactly 3 steps. He reminded the court that we were here to apply law to facts and that the record would speak for itself. He corrected a number, clarified a date, and sat down. It looked like we'd done nothing. That was the point. You learn things about people when they don't get the friction they came for. Her posture shifted by half an inch, then another. The smile stayed, but it had to work harder. She leaned into a whisper with her attorney, and he tightened his jaw while pretending not to. The bailiff's chair creaked. Paper whispered. Someone coughed into a sleeve. The room felt like a glass of water set on a table that had just stopped shaking. The clerk approached with a new packet for the bench, heavy, tabbed, the color of paper that has been handled by hands that know exactly what they're looking for. The judge squared the stack with 2 taps and began leafing through it. Her lawyer angled forward, pen hovering as if proximity could create advantage. She adjusted her bracelet and crossed her legs the other way, a small reset that read like nerves if you've spent enough time reading people. I thought about all the days that brought me to this one. Rooms above garages and borrowed conference spaces, and the single long table we built out of 2 shorter ones when we couldn't afford more. I thought about the investors who stayed and the ones who didn't, the hires who changed everything. I thought about the night I first believed we would make it and the morning after when I learned belief means nothing without execution. This room was just another version of that lesson. Her lawyer shifted to a different tack. If his opening act had been morality, the second was pity. He spoke of emotional labor, of invisible work, of the weight his client had carried so that I could do what I did. He gestured lightly toward her as though motion itself could translate into proof. She looked down, then up, then down again, perfect choreography for sympathy. It was good theater. It was not law. The judge let him finish and then lifted a thin folder from beneath the thicker stack. He took a breath, so small you'd miss it if you weren't waiting for it, and he looked at both tables before looking at the paper in his hand. Paper has a sound when it matters. It moves slower. He turned a page, read, turned another. No one spoke. The room took on that weight that falls when a decision isn't made yet, but is already close enough to change air pressure. I didn't look at her. I watched the bench. Her patience ran 5 seconds shorter than mine. She glanced at me and then at the folder, and for the first time all morning the smile wavered. Just a flicker, something a camera might miss but a man across a table never does. Her attorney leaned in to whisper, and she nodded as if she understood a thing she didn't. The judge set the thin folder down, aligned it with the edge of the thicker one, and lifted his gaze. He began with dates and signatures, the simple spine of every decision that holds. He said the word agreement in a tone that made it clear we were leaving the land of stories and arriving in the country of terms. The gallery quieted in a way you can feel on your skin. Across the aisle, the pen in her lawyer's hand froze an inch above the page. She stopped breathing for a beat and then started again, shallow, as if the room had gotten smaller. I kept my hands where they had been since the hearing began, fingers laced, knuckles still. A man can live a long time between two sentences if he knows how to sit there. The judge's eyes returned to the page. He read the next line to himself, once, then twice, the way careful people do when they know the weight of what they're about to say. He placed the tip of his pen against a margin no one else could see, and the room leaned toward him without moving. That was the moment I felt the shift, not loud, just a clean click as the case slid from theater to record. Then he lifted the folder labeled with our names and the date nearly a decade old, and he began to read it into the room. The judge didn't change his tone when he said the word that mattered. Agreement. He read the date, nearly a decade old, then the caption, then the section headings the way a pilot reads a checklist, steady, exact, uninterested in drama. He recited definitions first, terms, parties, consideration, before walking into the one clause that turns a room into a tunnel. Fidelity. The sentence was plain English and short enough to fit in memory. A breach through infidelity voids claims to marital assets and waives spousal support. He read it once, then again, the second pass for the record more than for the people in the room. Across the table, the smile that had followed her into the courthouse stalled mid-expression. You could see the brain lag a second behind the face, like audio out of sync with video. Her lawyer's pen stopped in midair. He turned his head toward her, not fast, but with the stiffness of a man who realizes he's been driving on the wrong highway for 20 minutes. His voice came out in a whisper sharp enough to carry 3 rows back. Why didn't you tell me this? She didn't answer. The judge kept reading, unbothered by the human part. The agreement had signatures, notarization, and an attached schedule of separate property. It also had a page of initials beside the very clause he'd just emphasized. He noted the initials without looking up. Then he turned to the supporting record the way a surgeon turns to an instrument he's already asked for. Exhibits by number. Affidavits with dates. Hotel records with timestamps. Messages preserved by a forensic download that courts like because time doesn't lie even when people do. He didn't read the contents aloud. He simply said the words that matter in rooms like that. The court finds the clause enforceable and the breach established. Sound drains from a courtroom gradually, like water leaving a basin. The gallery stopped whispering. My attorney sat so still he could have been a photograph. I stayed where I was, hands laced, shoulders down. Across from me, she reached for the yellow pad and then set it down without writing. Her throat worked once and failed to produce words. Her lawyer adjusted his tie and stood to object, then thought better and sat back down. The judge's pen tapped the margin once. He wasn't taking questions. If the first blow took the floor out from under her, the second removed the walls. The judge set the thin folder aside and lifted the thicker packet, the one with tabs flagged in colors that mean someone has done months of quiet work. He spoke about characterization first, separate property versus marital property, titles, timing. Then he moved to status. Pretrial transfers. Irrevocable trust. He spoke my father's name and the date the trust instruments were executed, the way a referee announces a rule you can argue with on the sidewalk, but not on the field. The company. The lake cabin. The investment properties. Accounts that sit where judges can't reach just because a person feels like reaching. Excluded from distribution, he said, without heat. Her chair made a small sound as she shifted, the kind of sound you only hear when everyone else has stopped moving. She leaned toward her lawyer with a whisper that came out as breath. He was looking at the tabs he should have asked about weeks ago and didn't. He stood and requested a continuance in the respectful tone lawyers use when they know they're begging. The judge glanced at the docket, at our case number, at the date stamps on the filings. Denied. One word can be merciful when it is quick. She tried for a smile then, but it twitched and settled into something closer to a wince. The confidence that had carried her through brunches and phone calls and the corridor outside couldn't find purchase in this room. She looked smaller without it. The court went through the rest of the list the way a janitor empties bins at closing time. Methodical, unhurried, uninterested in the stories people tell about trash. Vehicles. Furnishings. A short paragraph on personal effects that sounded like a mercy. The judge referenced a bank account with a balance that wouldn't fund a long vacation, much less a new life, and assigned it with the same tone he used for everything else. Neutrality is a blade if you've only ever argued with people who raise their voices. Her attorney tried a different angle, contribution, reliance, lifestyle. He spoke the word equitable with the soft drawl of appeal, like stretching a syllable could stretch a principle. The judge made a note and did not engage. He returned to the clause he'd read at the top, the one with the initials beside it, and let the silence between sentences do the work a lecture might have done in a different room with a different audience. I watched the small things. The way she started chewing the inside of her cheek. The way her left foot began to bounce and then stopped when she noticed it. The way her hand went looking for her phone and found a pen instead. Little tells add up. They make patterns. Patterns become outcomes. I thought about all the times in the last year she'd asked for numbers without asking for us. I thought about the laugh she saved for whatever waited behind the lock screen. I thought about drift and how quiet it is until it isn't. When the judge summarized, he kept to bullet points. The agreement is valid. The clause is enforceable. The breach is established. The assets identified as separate remain separate. The trust assets are not before the court. He asked if either party needed clarification. Her lawyer said, "Your Honor," and then nothing at all, because sometimes there isn't a sentence that can follow those words without making a man sound smaller. My attorney said, "No, Your Honor." I said nothing. That had been the plan all along. In the gallery, you could hear a coat sleeve brush a wooden pew. A throat clear. The click of a pen that would not be used again today. Outside, the light through the high windows looked the same as it had an hour earlier, but inside the room everything had moved several inches and would not move back. She stared at the table in front of her as if it might offer choices that no longer existed. The future she'd narrated out loud, in granite countertops and lake views and a car with a badge she'd practiced saying, collapsed into the 2 pages of a minute order. Her attorney leaned over at last, voice low, mouth tight. She nodded without looking at him. I could guess the conversation anyway. Options. Appeals. Costs. Time. Words that sound like hope if you say them fast, and like arithmetic if you write them down. The bench turned one last page, added a small notation, and set the pen aside. The clerk gathered the exhibits. The bailiff shifted his weight. I sat still and let the room catch up to reality. I wasn't happy exactly. Satisfaction isn't the right word for moments like this. It was something quieter than that, something like alignment. Facts had met their proper edges. Stories had been cut back to size. When you spend your life building systems, you learn to recognize when a process has worked the way it was designed. That's what it felt like, design doing what design does. She finally looked at me. Not the practiced glance she'd used all morning, but a clean, unguarded look a person gives when the mask has slipped and it's too late to pick it back up. There was anger in it, yes, and disbelief. We were not the people she'd told her friends we were. The judge indicated he was ready to move to the remaining formalities. I breathed once, slow, and unclasped my hands. The performance was over. The consequences had a shape now, and it wasn't the one she'd laughed about in the hallway. What remained would be paperwork. Paperwork I knew how to do. Paperwork that doesn't care who smiled first when the day began. The gavel landed like a knuckle on a wooden door, brief, final, ordinary. The bailiff's baritone rolled through the room, and then the room exhaled. Paper moved again. Chairs scraped. The court's language shrank back into human sounds. I unclasped my hands and felt the blood return to my fingers. We handled the formalities. Signatures. Initials. The clerk slid sets of pages to each table, and I did what I've always done with documents that matter. Read what I was signing, signed what I understood, left blanks alone until they weren't blanks anymore. Across from me, she stared at a paragraph without seeing it, lips moving like she could read her way into a different outcome. Her lawyer tapped a line with the butt of his pen. She nodded without lifting her eyes. When it ended simply. The judge stood, the room stood, and then we weren't in his court anymore. We were just people in a room. My attorney placed a folder in my hand, the kind of humble object that can outlive noise. We shook once. "You're good," he said, and that was all there was to say. He'd been paid to be precise. In the hallway, the carpet swallowed footsteps. The fluorescent ceiling made everyone look honest, whether they were or not. She stepped out with her lawyer half a length ahead and stopped to adjust a bracelet that suddenly seemed too loose. She caught my eye for a second, not the defiant glance from the morning, but something rawer, a look that belonged to a person who has just learned what words like clause and enforceable and excluded actually do when they meet a life. I held it and let it pass. Her lawyer set a packet on the bench outside the elevators. A single page sat on top with a logo and a number that took 2 hands to steady. 5 figures for services rendered. He slid it toward her like a waiter with a check he knows will change the tenor of the table. She blinked twice, and then once more, slower. She had planned to pay that bill with money that no longer existed for her. I didn't wait for the elevator. I took the stairs, 2 at a time on the turns, single steps on the straight runs. The garage air was cool and smelled like concrete. That clean nothing smell that tells you you're below ground and safe from weather. I sat in the driver's seat without starting the car and let the morning replay in a quiet, unedited loop. The fidelity clause, the initials beside it, the trust instruments that had moved the pieces off the board where they could be reached by adjectives. None of it felt triumphant. It felt correct. Back at the office, my assistant looked up with a question, and I answered with a nod. We had a hiring committee in the afternoon and a product review tomorrow morning. Companies don't care about your personal life. Work is a river that keeps moving even when you step to the bank for a minute. I stepped back in. We made decisions. We set dates. I laughed once, a small honest sound at a joke about an API that never wants to behave. It surprised me by arriving without permission. On the way home, I called my father. He answered on the second ring, said my name the way men from his generation say it. Plain, no punctuation. We kept it short. Thank you. You're welcome. See you Sunday. The trust documents had meant diligence to him. The house greeted me with its usual silence. I walked through rooms I knew by sound more than sight. The whisper of the kitchen drawers, the weight of the front door, the soft click of the study lamp. I took a box from the hall closet and labeled it with a black marker. Personal. I packed what was clearly hers without commentary. I typed a short message and sent it through counsel that afternoon. A mover will be here Saturday between 10 and noon. I won't be home. Let me know if you need a different window. No extra words. Consequences, not punishment. Her mother called that evening and left a voicemail that started as prayer and ended as arithmetic. She said appeals like a life raft and retainer like a rain cloud. I listened to the first 20 seconds and deleted it. I texted a mutual friend who had been decent through all of it. Paperwork is final. Please pass along that movers are scheduled. Thank you for keeping the middle calm. He answered with a thumb and a sentence I didn't expect. You handled this like a man who knows himself. I slept finally. In the morning I made coffee and left the cup in the sink without rinsing it. Small rebellion. I took a run around the lake and let my breath set the tempo for thoughts that didn't need to be words. The world looked exactly the same. Nothing glowed, nothing darkened. Contentment doesn't announce itself. It arrives like a room at the right temperature. There were administrative remains. Closing an old joint card that had felt more symbolic than useful. Updating beneficiaries with a pen that didn't care how steady my hand was. Emailing HR to remove a name from an insurance file. Changing a password I'd left alone out of sentimentality I couldn't justify anymore. None of it hurt. Each task skimmed a thin layer of past off the surface of the day and left the rest clean. She messaged through attorneys to say she wanted to retrieve a few items early. I said yes and picked a different window, then left the key with the building manager. When I returned that evening, the house had a new geometry. Spaces that used to curved around her now drew straight lines to doors and windows. I stood in the living room and listened to the hum of the refrigerator, the air vents, even breath, my own. I'm supposed to feel rage. The assets remained where they belonged. The company remained what it has always been. Work that matters to people who have trusted me to keep my promises. The trust did what it was built to do. The agreement did what we both signed it to do. She laughed at the table this morning. That's how the day began. She believed momentum had the same weight as truth. She believed a story told often enough becomes a judgment if you tell it in the right room. What she met instead was the cold mercy of facts. By afternoon, she was holding a bill with more digits than she expected, realizing the future she'd spent like cash was store credit at a shop that doesn't exist. Debt is a teacher. So is silence. I won't be cruel about it. Cruelty is just another way of staying connected. I'll be busy. There's a hiring offer to finalize, a friend to meet for barbecue on Saturday, a stack of books I promised myself I'd actually finish this time. I might take a long weekend somewhere nobody knows me and walk a city without checking my phone. Maybe I'll replace the heavy dining table with something smaller and honest. Maybe I'll start eating on the porch again. People ask what I learned. The answer is simple enough to fit on a single line. Respect is not negotiable. Not in contracts. I left the courthouse with my hands empty and my name unaltered. That's enough. The door closed behind me and didn't need to lock itself loudly to be closed. She walked away with a folder she didn't want, a bill she hadn't planned for, and a silence she'll have to carry for a while. I walked toward the afternoon light, toward work that still needs doing, toward a life measured in decisions I can stand behind when no one is watching.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.